There is a kind of loneliness that doesn't look like loneliness at all. It doesn't come with tears, dramatic breakdowns, or obvious isolation. Instead, it hides quietly behind routine, behind forced laughter, behind a perfectly normal-looking life. It slips into the pauses between conversations, into the moments when you tell someone, "I'm just busy," even though what you really mean is, "I don't know who to talk to anymore." This isn't the loneliness of being physically alone. It's the loneliness of realizing that the world can be full, but your connections can still feel empty. It's the discomfort of knowing that if you disappeared for a little while, people might not notice right away. And even if something amazing or heartbreaking happened, you wouldn't know who to share it with. This kind of loneliness grows slowly. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. It starts to shape the way you think, the way you move through life. You begin to feel like an observer instead of a participant, like someone watching their own story from a distance. People often assume that anyone without friends must be distant, uninterested, or simply antisocial. But that's almost never the whole truth. Sometimes the opposite is true. Those who feel the deepest loneliness are often the ones who notice the most. They're the ones who observe every small shift in tone, every forced smile, every moment someone's energy changes. They feel everything, sometimes too deeply. And eventually, they retreat not because they dislike people, but because connection begins to feel unsafe. Psychologically, long periods of disconnection change the brain. When social bonds weaken, the brain interprets it as a threat. The same areas activated by physical pain light up during chronic loneliness. That's why this kind of isolation doesn't just feel emotional, it feels physical. Your heart rate shifts. Your sleep becomes shallow. Your mind starts bracing for danger in situations where no real danger exists. Human beings evolved in groups, and being alone once signaled risk. That instinct still lives inside us. Yet today, you can be surrounded by hundreds of people online and still feel invisible. Because attention is not connection, and validation is not understanding. There's a massive difference between being noticed and being truly known. And people who live without close friends understand this difference painfully well. Most didn't choose this life suddenly. It never happens overnight. It happens through a series of small moments, disappointments that feel insignificant by themselves, but accumulate over time. You share something vulnerable and someone laughs. You trust someone and they misuse it. You try to open up, but you're dismissed or misunderstood. Slowly, your brain learns a painful rule. It's safer not to try, so you stop reaching out. You stop initiating conversations. You tell yourself that you prefer peace over people. And for a while, solitude genuinely feels healing. It gives you control. It gives you space to breathe. But after enough time, solitude shifts from healing to haunting. It's no longer peaceful, it becomes a reminder of what's missing. That's because human beings are wired for connection. Even the most independent souls still desire to be understood by someone. But when years pass without that feeling, something strange happens inside you. Your own inner voice becomes louder than the world. Your thoughts swirl without an outlet. You start replaying memories, old friendships, old betrayals, wondering where the story turned. Sometimes you blame yourself. Sometimes you blame other people. But most of the time, it's neither. It's simply the intersection of human psychology and human pain. Psychologists call this phenomenon learned social helplessness. After enough failed attempts at connection, your mind begins to associate reaching out with rejection. Even when you eventually meet kind-hearted people, your guard stays up. You want connection, but you're afraid to believe in it. You crave depth, yet fear the vulnerability required to build it. This creates a contradiction inside you. You tell yourself you're fine alone because it feels safer, but deep down, you're still waiting for someone who sees you without needing explanations. Someone who understands the silence behind your words. As more time passes, loneliness begins to distort your self-perception. It whispers that you're too much or not enough, that you don't deserve attention or closeness. You start rejecting yourself before anyone else has the chance to. You isolate, not out of pride, but out of protection. But here's the hidden truth. Loneliness doesn't always appear sad on the outside. Many people without friends seem perfectly fine. They smile, work, maintain routines, and even seem social online. But internally, they live in two worlds, the one they show others and the one they feel. They build a version of themselves that can function without connection, but that version feels hollow, like an echo without a voice to answer. People often judge those who have no friends. They call them strange, distant, or difficult. But if you listen to their stories, you'll almost always find moments of quiet heartbreak times when they gave too much and received too little. Times when they opened up and were left standing alone. And that heartbreak shapes them more deeply than anyone realizes. Without real connection, the world becomes smaller. Thoughts echo without an external perspective to balance them. Emotions circulate without being shared, processed, or softened. Psychologists say that long periods of isolation can weaken empathy node because people stop caring, but because they stop practicing emotional exchange. Empathy is a muscle. When unused, it dims. And yet, people who have been lonely for a long time often crave deeper friendship than anyone else. They see connection in high definition. They romanticize the idea of being known. They treasure even the smallest gestures because they've spent years without them. But the longer they stay isolated, the more they question whether they deserve closeness at all. That is where the real struggle begins. For people who have lived without close friendships for years, something subtle but powerful begins to change inside them. They start adjusting themselves, not consciously, but emotionally. The longer they stay unseen, the more they begin to shape their personality around invisibility. They soften their voice. They limit their presence. They reduce their needs so they take up less space. And without noticing, they build a version of themselves that feels easier for the world to overlook. This isn't because they lack depth or value. It's because they've learned, through pain, that visibility often leads to disappointment. When someone has been rejected, misunderstood, or excluded repeatedly, the brain begins to predict rejection before it happens. It's a defense mechanism, an emotional shield that protects them from being hurt again. They begin to assume that if they show too much of who they are, the outcome will be the same as before: silence, distance, or abandonment. Psychologists refer to this as a distorted social self-concept. You start seeing yourself through the imagined judgments of others, and instead of being seen for who you truly are, you filter yourself into a version that feels safer. You speak less. You reveal less. You expect less. And eventually, you forget what it felt like to show up as your full, unedited self. But here's the paradox. The more you hold back to avoid rejection, the more disconnected you become. The walls built to protect you end up isolating you further. You begin living as a quieter version of yourself. Not because that's who you are, but because that's who you've had to become. over time. Emotional armor becomes emotional identity. Many people who have no friends don't struggle with social skills. They struggle with emotional safety. They don't fear people, they fear the unpredictable nature of connection. They fear giving someone the power to hurt them again. They fear being misunderstood after finally deciding to open up. So they retreat into solitude, not out of pride, but out of self-preservation. And yet, the loneliness doesn't disappear. It lingers quietly, like a low hum in the background of life. It shows up at night when everything is silent. It appears in moments of achievement when there's no one to celebrate with. It intensifies during pain when there's no one to lean on. Loneliness doesn't just live in absence, it lives in the spaces where connection should have existed. That's why people who have been isolated for long periods often become hyper-aware of social cues. They replay conversations in their mind. They analyze tone, timing, and body language. They read between lines that were never written. Their brain learns to scan for danger in every interaction, not because it's logical, but because it's familiar. When you've been hurt before, caution becomes instinct. But this hyper-awareness creates another loop. The more you overthink, the harder genuine connection becomes. The more you worry about being too much or too little, the more self-conscious you become. People sense that distance, misinterpret it as disinterest, and pull away. And that withdrawal reinforces the very loneliness you were trying to escape. It's not your fault. It's the mind's attempt to stay safe. Even when that safety costs connection. Time also shifts when you live without closeness. Days blur together. Moments feel heavier. Achievements feel quieter. Psychologists have found that prolonged loneliness alters time perception. When you have no one to share life with, the emotional texture of time changes. Silence feels longer. Mornings feel duller. Special occasions lose their meaning. Life becomes a series of events with no witness. And yet, something meaningful can emerge inside this solitude. Because solitude itself is not the enemy. The real struggle is forced solitude, the kind you didn't choose. But within the layers of loneliness, people often develop profound self. They understand their emotions deeply. They think carefully. They observe quietly. They see things others overlook. Depth becomes a byproduct of silence. But depth alone isn't enough to heal loneliness. What people truly crave is reflection being mirrored by another human being. Humans don't just become themselves alone. We become ourselves through connection, through resonance, through the feeling that someone else understands our inner world. When that's missing, your identity begins to feel uncertain, as if you're living in a fog with no echo. And that is the most painful part of this kind of loneliness, the feeling of invisibility. Not just being alone, but existing without recognition. Feeling like your emotions don't land anywhere. Feeling like your thoughts never reach another mind. Feeling like you are living inside your own head without a bridge to the external world. Yet beneath this invisibility, there is also an extraordinary capacity for empathy. People who have lived in loneliness often understand human pain more deeply than anyone else. They know what it feels like to go unnoticed, so they notice others. They pay attention to people who sit alone. They feel the emotions behind someone's silence. They recognize subtle sadness in a way others don't. Their hearts become sensitive not because they are weak, but because they've lived through emotional starvation. That is the paradox of lonely. People, the very individuals who have no friends, often become the best friends. They understand loyalty. They understand emotional depth. They understand the value of being present. They understand how rare genuine connection is. Their absence of relationships is not a sign of lack, it is a sign of how deeply they value connection when it finally comes. But even with this depth, loneliness remains a heavy burden. Many people stuck in long-term isolation begin to internalize false beliefs about themselves. They start thinking they're fundamentally different or unlovable or forever misunderstood. They believe their loneliness is a permanent state, not a temporary season. They assume they are the problem, when they are simply responding to emotional wounds. And this belief system becomes its own barrier. If you think you are unworthy of connection, you'll unconsciously sabotage opportunities for it. You'll assume people are disinterested before they even speak. You'll retreat even when someone tries to get closer. Loneliness becomes a lens that shapes your perception, not a reflection of your true worth. But here's the truth. Many lonely people don't realize your loneliness is not who you are. It's what happened to you. And what happened to you can change. You can relearn connection. You can rebuild social trust. You can rediscover how to express your full self again. But this process starts gently with understanding, not force. Healing from long-term loneliness is not a dramatic transformation. It doesn't arrive suddenly, and it doesn't begin with other people. It begins quietly inside you long before new friendships enter your life. Healing starts when you stop blaming yourself for what you went through and begin understanding that loneliness was never a sign of failure. It was a response, an adaptation, a shield you built when connection felt unsafe. The first step isn't making new friends. It's remembering who you were before you began dimming yourself. For many people who've lived in isolation, childhood holds the first clues. They were often the ones who felt deeply, thought quietly, observed instead of competing for attention. They noticed details others missed. They cared deeply, even when they were too shy to show it. That sensitivity was never a weakness. It was the raw material of emotional intelligence. But in a world that celebrates loudness over depth, sensitive souls often grow up believing something is wrong with them. So they shrink. They adjust. They edit themselves. They become smaller, quieter, more careful. They pretend they're fine being alone because pretending feels easier than hoping. They convince themselves that solitude is their nature, not their wound. But difference was never the real problem. The problem was the meaning they were taught to attach to their difference. Being quiet was mistaken for weakness. Being introspective was mistaken for disinterest. Being sensitive was mistaken for fragility. And over time, these misunderstandings shaped a distorted self. But here's the truth. The traits that isolated you are the same traits that will make you extraordinary when you reconnect. Sensitivity becomes compassion. Observation becomes insight. Solitude becomes self-awareness. Depth becomes emotional intelligence. Loneliness didn't erase your strengths, it refined them. The second step in healing is recognizing that belonging is not about fitting in with everyone. It's about finding people who feel like home. You don't need crowds. You don't need constant interaction. You need resonance people who understand silence, who value depth, who don't require performance. And the right people don't appear when you become perfect, they appear when you become honest. Friendship is not earned through flawless behavior. It grows from vulnerability, presence, and small, real moments. But vulnerability feels terrifying when you've spent years protecting yourself. Opening up feels like handing someone a map to your emotional bruises. So the brain resists. It tries to protect you from the unknown. It whispers that you'll be misunderstood again. It tells you to stay safe. But staying safe also means staying alone. That's the paradox you must gently unlearn. Connection requires risk, but not reckless risk. Small risks, manageable ones, the kind that build emotional strength rather than overwhelm. Healing begins through small gestures. You smile back when someone looks at you. You reply instead of overthinking. You say yes to a simple plan. You let conversations flow without rehearsing them in your mind. You allow silence without interpreting it as rejection. These tiny acts aren't meaningless. They're rewiring your brain to trust again. Psychologists explain that neural pathways change through repetition. If loneliness trained your mind to expect rejection, connection can retrain it to expect possibility. Every small moment of human warmth becomes a counterexample that slowly dissolves the belief that you're unworthy of closeness. Healing doesn't happen in one large leap. It happens in dozens of quiet, gentle ones. Many people who lived in long silence eventually discover that they don't need many friends. They need the right ones. They don't need endless conversations, they need real ones. They don't need constant attention, they need consistent presence. They don't need a crowd, they need recognition. They need someone who sees depth instead of difficulty. Someone who hears the silence behind their words. Someone who understands that quiet doesn't mean uncaring. Someone who feels the same quiet and recognizes it in you. And when this kind of connection finally appears, it doesn't feel overwhelming. It feels familiar, like meeting someone you somehow knew before. But to attract that kind of friendship, you need something even more important than courage. You need clarity, the clarity that comes from understanding your worth, independent of who stays or leaves. Part of healing is grieving old versions of yourself, the one who overstretched to keep people near, the one who accepted the bare minimum and called it companionship, the one who silenced truth to avoid losing someone who wasn't meant to stay. Those versions were doing their best, but you don't need to live through them anymore. Once you release them, a shift happens. You stop chasing people. You stop begging for attention. You stop performing. Your energy becomes calm, grounded, whole. Instead of searching for people to fill your emptiness, you begin attracting people who meet your fullness. This is when connection becomes real, not driven by fear, but by authenticity. And here's something important. Loneliness doesn't erase your ability to connect. It only pauses it. Just like a muscle wakes up after rest, your social self wakes up too. Slowly at first, gently, but it wakes up. What you once saw as flaws, your sensitivity, your depth, your quiet nature, become the exact qualities that draw the right people toward you. People who don't fear depth. People who appreciate silence. People who understand your pauses, your thoughts, your quiet empathy. Eventually, something beautiful happens. You meet someone who reflects the world inside you. Someone whose presence feels safe. Someone who doesn't require explanations. Someone who understands how it feels to move through life unseen. And when they look at you with genuine recognition, something inside you softens. All the years you spent wondering if something was wrong with you begin to make sense. You realize loneliness wasn't punishment, it was preparation. A season that shaped your emotional clarity, refined your boundaries, and deepened your capacity for real connection. And in that moment, you finally understand a quiet truth. Friendship isn't about quantity. It's about recognition. It's when two people look at each other and think, "You too. I thought I was the only one." This kind of friendship doesn't depend on constant messages or endless plans. It's built on gentle understanding, shared silence, emotional safety, and mutual depth. It is quiet but powerful, rare but real, and worth every difficult year that shaped you to receive it. Until that moment comes, walk gently with yourself. Keep your heart open, not wide, just enough.